GST process. The UPA government had held detailed consultations, and the bill introduced by them had gone through an extensive standing committee process. Thereafter, I had personally had a series of meetings, the officials had a series of meetings, both at the official level and the ministerial level. Finally, it was crystallized to only a few issues. And we did discuss those issues because we want states to be on board. The first, of course, was that the payment of the CST compensation. So I have already announced that we'll make the payment of the CST compensation. But since it's a past liability for some years, we'll have to do it in installments. And I do intend to provide for an installment in this financial year, which goes on till 31st of March. So obviously there'll have to be a supplementary grant in February to provide for that payment. The second issue was with regard to the inclusion of petroleum products within the GST framework. The states were ad idem of one view on the question of keeping alcohol out, which we had agreed. On petroleum, we are faced with the two main queries. One is that the architecture of GST must be a perfect architecture. And secondly, it can provide in the transitory phase a comfort level to the states. And therefore, while accommodating the concerns of the states, the present bill provides for petroleum being included within the constitutional amendment. But the date on which petroleum can be taxed under GST will be decided by the GST Council. The composition of the council is such that it actually makes effective the whole concept of cooperative federalism. 2/3 of the representation will be of the states and 1/3 of the center. So the center has a 1/3 representation, the states have a 2/3 representation, and all decisions require a 75% vote to be cleared. So the majority of the states can't push a decision, the center alone can't push a decision, but the two collectively can push a decision. And therefore the states and the center will collectively decide. And no one can arbitrarily decide when to do it. And similarly, all other decisions of the finer print of the GST when it's implemented. Having got over these two issues, there were state-specific issues. And the state-specific issues were with regard to octroi in the octroi charging states or entry tax, with regard to the manufacturing states who fear that initially their taxation may come down, to agricultural producing states who felt that purchasing tax once subsumed will cost them revenue. Now this was a key concern, and then there was a collective concern. What happens if the actual tax collected by a state goes down? I have always called it the fear of the unknown. This was there at the time of VAT, it is there now. And therefore, collectively we arrived at a formulation There'll be taxes which the states are not entitled to, which they will be now entitled to, service tax. And a large share comes from Maharashtra, some share comes from Karnataka. So their octroi loss will be more than compensated. Secondly, for a 2-year period, with a sunset clause, to give them initial comfort, we have provided for an additional 1% SGST.
Additional tax.
Additional tax we call it, not SGST. That's the wrong phrase that I've used. As far as the states are concerned. No, there's not an entry tax. It's a general tax, 1%. Thirdly, we have given a constitutional assurance itself, not an oral assurance, that in the first 5 years, any loss will be compensated to the extent of 100% in the first year, 75% first 3 years, 75% in the fourth year, and 50% in the fifth year. With these additional taxes within the kitty of the state, this 1% additional tax for 2 years, and a constitutional assurance of 5 years, I think the transition phase will be adequately comfortable as far as the states are concerned. We don't envisage the revenues of any state to come down. The consuming states will gain immediately. With service tax within their ambit, the producing states, being more affluent, will also gain from the very beginning. But we have more than provided for those states to be benefited. I do believe that seamless transfer of goods and services, absence of Inspector Raj, no tax on tax, obviating the possibility of evasion and avoidance, will actually add to the revenues of both the state and the center. It will be a win-win situation for both of us. And it will be the single most important tax reform after 1947. On the procedure of how we arrived at, we have all agreed. The states had a position. In the meeting I had with the states on last Friday, some issues were raised. I then requested the states, and I'm glad to say that in almost all cases, the states were not divided on political lines. Any comfort that they wanted was on the center-state relationship issue. And I think that's a high point for Indian federalism. Someone tried to reopen settled issues without going into any details of this. I requested the states to, after giving them adequate comfort of what I have said just now, to sit with me separately or have a group sitting with me. Who comes as a part of the group was a decision of the states. We did not select anyone. If someone didn't choose to come because a priority was to a flight being taken out of Delhi, then that's not a problem of my creation. That meeting continued till late night. I think most of you also burnt midnight oil that day. It is incorrectly stated that only the chairman came or one or two members came. except for the fact that cameras were not fitted into that meeting. The media standing outside knew everything as to who was there. The meeting, then the states wanted us to draft the amendment and show it to them. So across party lines, J&K, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, these were amongst the states who were coming to that meeting. Punjab, Haryana, Gujarat, and these were states which had strong views. Karnataka. And finally, even in the draft we prepared, the states wanted some changes. We accommodated those changes. It's only that I have gone to Parliament. Now I just want to read one or two extracts to you. This is now the Empowered Committee's meeting of 8th February 2013. I had read these extracts in the last meeting of the Empowered Committee. On CST compensation. In case GST is not implemented during 2013-14, then the position should be reviewed for payment of full CST compensation for the year 2013-14 and 14-15. In case due to financial constraints the Government of India is not in a position to make full payment of CST compensation to the states, then 2% CST rate should be increased to 4% to avoid further need for payment of CST compensation to the states in future. So how much compensation and for which period is to be paid? There is an Empowered Committee decision to that effect. Nobody can be allowed to add elasticity to this period or the amount.
Final decision.
In the final decision they said, the Empowered Committee, keeping in view the financial constraints faced by the Government of India, agreed for the year 2010-11 CST compensation should be worked at as per the guidelines, and 100% payment of CST compensation to be made to the states immediately, preferable during the current financial year itself or at most by 2013. Now, this whole issue of who is the General Council, the GST Council. The decision is, it is broadly felt by the Empowered Committee that if in clause 8 of Article 279A the word consensus is kept, it will make the GST Council non-functional. Now what is consensus, they said? This was the original phrase. Therefore it was suggested that if voting takes place in the meeting, the central representatives present in the GST Council meeting should have 1/3 weightage. The state representatives present in the meeting should have 2/3 weightage. And the decision should be taken by a 3/4 weightage. This is what the Constitution Amendment says. No one state can now seek to reverse this decision when the central government is accepting the entire decision of the Empowered Committee. On petroleum, after due deliberation and consideration, it was broadly agreed by the Empowered Committee that petroleum, crude, high-speed diesel motor spirit, commonly known as petrol, natural gas and aviation turbine fuel, should be deleted from clause 12A. However, the provision regarding alcoholic liquor for human consumption should be retained. So this was a unanimous decision of the Empowered Committee, and we have further liberalized it to say that the levy on petroleum will begin only when this council with 2/3 voting right of the states decides. So that during the transition period, it's a major reform, the states have an element of comfort level. And these are all included in the Constitution Amendment, including the payment of compensation.